Well, I'm going to get started and everyone can continue to pop in. But today we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of people are experiencing right now as we deal with a global pandemic and children at home and a lot of uncertainty is managing anxiety and fear. As Jamie mentioned, I'm Christa and I'm a holistic life coach. I was trained right here in Nashville by Radiant Health Coach or Life Coach Institute, and I'm actually certified through the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation. My main goal personally is to help people achieve happiness because I think that everyone deserves to be happy, and that is through mindful and conscious living. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I also hold a certification in mindfulness, and I'll discuss a little bit more about that. And I'm also informed in trauma and attachment styles. So that has a lot to do with psychotherapy. And on that note, I wanted to note I am not a psychotherapist. I do not hold a license in psychotherapy, so I cannot diagnose and I cannot treat, and I cannot prescribe. So those are three things that I cannot do. But one thing that I can do is meet you exactly where you are and help you to move forward. So basically, I explain to all my clients is they are their biggest healer. And the way that you heal is to go inside and to figure out what you need for yourself. And all my job is you hand me a shovel and I help dig that for you. I help you dig that. Additionally, I'm also a Reiki practitioner. I'm not going to get into much of that today, but it has a lot to do with healing energy and a lot, basically a conduit of healing energy. So a lot of people might come to see me if they're experiencing energy blocks and different energy meridians. It's very similar to the Chinese acupuncture. So that's not something I'm getting into today, but that is something that I'm passionate about. So basically, our top priority right now is to manage ourselves. And that is not to manage our kids or our husbands or our businesses or anything else. But the number one priority that we have right now in this crazy time is to manage ourselves. Because if we can't manage ourselves, then everything else is not unmanageable. So basically, anxiety is contagious, but so is calm. So if we can find a way to be calm in all of this, then that becomes contagious and creates a domino effect to those around us. And when I say anxiety is contagious, I like to use the example of you're sitting in a meeting or you're sitting at dinner and everyone is having amazing conversation, and one person enters the room that has got a crazy amount of anxiety, and everyone reads off of that, and it kind of changes the trajectory of everything in the room. So if anxiety is contagious, just know that when you're walking into a room and you're anxious, everyone can feed off of that. So today I'm going to talk about the very basics of what anxiety is. So we're going to get a little scientific, but not deep dive into it because it can get crazy, but I'm just going to give you the basics of what causes anxiety disorders. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how anxiety affects us, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And then I'm going to give a lot of awesome tips on how to manage anxiety. And at the end, if we have enough time, I'm going to do a time check right now. If we have enough time, I'm going to take you guys through about a 5-minute guided meditation and then close with a prayer at the end and then open it up if anyone has any questions. So what is anxiety? And the reason why that I know so much about anxiety, I will just say, is 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And a lot of people are like, wow, you hide that well. And yes, I did. I hid it very well. I was what they call a stuffer. And I stuffed for so long and to the point of where I couldn't stuff anymore. And that is when I did seek help from a counselor, and I'm still seeing him on a weekly basis today. But I also started a healing journey and really educated myself a lot on what was going on in my body and my mind. So I knew a little bit more about how to manage it, because our bodies are amazingly designed. And God basically designed our bodies and our minds to protect us and keep us safe. But when anything is used to an overwhelming extent, it does not help us keep us safe anymore. It creates disorders. So anxiety disorders develop from a complex set of risk factors that includes, but is not limited to, genetics, brain chemistry, personality, and life events. I have a lot of people that say, well, anxiety doesn't run in my family. It doesn't really matter. It can be developed over time. And this is a staggering statistic to me. 33% of women experience an anxiety disorder within their lifetime. 33% of women. So 1 out of every 3 women will experience an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. And as I was looking at these statistics, I saw a really glaring statistic that I didn't want to see, and that's 8% of children will develop an anxiety disorder. So I love to keep that in the back of my mind as I think about anxiety being contagious and how important it is for me to control my own anxiety right now so that I don't continue to pass that on to my children. So John Eliot is a sports psychologist, and he puts it in the best words possible to me. The physical symptoms of fight or flight are what the human body has learned over thousands of years to operate efficiently and at the highest level. Anxiety is a cognitive interpretation of that physical response. So basically, when we are put into that primal cue of fight or flight, that starts in our body first. So our body and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is, I'm going to stand up right around here, right around our belly, when it signals a response, it could be someone's tone of voice, it could be a situation, it could be the way someone said something, it could be the news. But when our body senses that it is in danger, it sends off a signal to our brain to fight or flight. So it tells the brain, like, we got to get out of here, we got to protect ourselves. So when this happens, the body releases adrenaline to kick in the body into high gear, and cortisol to keep this response going. And then when the body releases cortisol, this is actually needed for healthy function of the body, but basically it sends our body into overdrive. And when this happens, we are so worried about maintaining this fight or flight that our prefrontal lobes, and this is where everything happens, is such as empathy, creative thinking, emotional regulation, executive function, the ability to make decisions. All of this happens right here in the prefrontal cortex. This is popped offline, and I like to call this, this is when we flip our lid. And if you're thinking of a toddler throwing a tantrum, it's because their lid is flipped. They can't think logically. They're only thinking in that crazy fight or flight response. So if you can think of an adult, or if you can think of a time yourself acted like that 3-year-old toddler, you had likely flipped your lid and had experienced something that seemed threatening to you, and your adrenaline and cortisol kicked into gear. So this is all good, but what happens when it happens for an extended period of time? So when we ignore our feelings and continue to push through situations, just keep pushing through, keep maintaining that go, 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 our feelings don't go away. They're actually held in our body, and they get louder and really hard to ignore. So what happens when we continue to push feelings away, when we continue to stay in that fight or flight? Basically, our nervous system, which starts at the vagus nerve and goes all the way through our body, starts becoming dysregulated. So that creates a low, what they call in psychology, a low window of tolerance. So we are unable to really control our emotions very well. So something very small might trigger us or set us off. So when I started to try to maintain my anxiety, my goal was to extend that window of tolerance. So to make it bigger, so that when small things that triggered me set me off, I wasn't behaviorally acting out towards the people I loved, or reverting which leads me to the next point. Disassociation can occur. So disassociation is actually a coping mechanism. You hear about fight, flight, or freeze. So it's that freeze response. So basically, if you zone out, if you are looking at someone but you can't hear them, you're stuck in your mind, that feeling of you're not in your body. And this is a response that basically shuts us down when our anxiety has gotten too much. And it can lead to things like depression. Depression and anxiety go hand in hand. I'm just talking about anxiety today, but that can lead to depression. And then after a prolonged period of anxiety, your body, mind, and spirit can no longer maintain the steady state of being, and life becomes unmanageable, and you just need a change. You need to feel safe again. So how does anxiety affect us? Emotionally, it creates feelings of constant worry, tension, and dread. There are protection mechanisms, like if I'm going to worry about every possible worst scenario that can happen so that I'm prepared when anything can happen. But actually that keeps us, our minds and our bodies don't know present from past from future. So we are just reliving those uncomfortable emotions over and over and over in our mind. And that's what rumination is. Rumination is thinking about a situation and every possible outcome, and then repeating that over and over. So if you're ever on a loop, I have found myself in many loops where you're just thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. This creates an emotional distance and disconnect. Physically, when you're exposed to that constant stream of adrenaline and cortisol, it can increase your heart rate and blood pressure. Cortisol also causes IBS, so inflammation in the gut, stomach aches. A lot of kids say, oh, my stomach hurts, on the first day of school. It's because their anxiety is kicked into high gear. Tension, neck tension, trouble sleeping, and fatigue. So when our adrenal glands are pumping out these hormones for so long, they eventually get fatigued. They're like, the jig is up, I'm done. So you might have that, I call it the 3 o'clock in the afternoon feeling, when you feel like either you need a nap or you need a cup of coffee. So basically that fatigue is telling you that you might have pushed through a little too hard today. And then also it can lead to chronic health issues. Spiritually, it creates this inability to enjoy life and relationships because you're so worried about things going wrong, that waiting for the next shoe to fall mentality. It creates a disconnection from self. You're so caught up in your mind that you can't connect your heart. Disconnection from others. My husband liked to call it floating. He's like, you're floating. So that would mean I would be disconnected. I would be so in my head that I would be floating around the house, cleaning, doing whatnot. Low self-worth, there's something wrong with me. I told myself that so many times. I was like, what is wrong with me? There was nothing wrong with me. There was absolutely nothing wrong with me. It was a beautiful way that I had created to protect myself that just wasn't working anymore. And then also it creates a disconnection from God, the inability to lay things over to him and trust that he will take care of everything and everyone will be okay. So let's get to the good part. I'm going to start with some basic tips for how I manage my anxiety and what I've been taught over the years. So the first is the basics, and I like to again refer back to the toddler. So if your toddler's cranky, are they sleepy? Have they eaten? And are they drinking enough water? So when you haven't gotten enough sleep, you haven't eaten a healthy meal, or you haven't drank enough water, there's a chemical dysfunction going on in your body. If you haven't eaten, your blood sugar could be low. If you haven't gotten enough sleep, your body could be fatigued from not enough rest. If you haven't drank enough water, so the list goes. And I could also argue sunshine. I think sunshine is super important as a basic need. But if you're feeling anxious, these are the first things that I always check in with myself, that hangry feeling. And I know if any moms with infants and toddlers that don't sleep, just that feeling the next day of just being anxious and lashing out at everyone around you. So these 3 basic needs should be checked off the list. And I know my sister-in-law actually suffers from a panic attack disorder, and she is the best rester I've ever known. So she knows exactly if she's having a panic attack, she needs to go lay down and rest. Oh, one more thing I wanted to note on the covering the basics. Hormonally, I know this is all ladies on this call. If you're experiencing any type of hormonal change, if you have become pregnant, if you are breastfeeding, or if you're about to start your period, these can signify like feelings of anxiety and just emotional dysregulation. So the point is there that you need to give yourself extra love. Make sure you're drinking a ton of water if your hormones are going through any change. So the first thing I want to talk about today is conscious living practices. I know I talked earlier about our subconscious thinks things are a threat, but maybe our conscious mind might not understand why we're in a state of anxiety. So conscious living practices basically help bridge the gap between the subconscious and the conscious mind. And research actually shows that 95% of our behavior comes from our subconscious mind and only 5% is in our conscious mind. So the goal of these tasks is basically to bring more of the subconscious into our conscience so that we are able to consciously basically analyze if things are a threat or not and push through situations when they are not. And it helps us to realize false beliefs and rewrite belief patterns. So if we are negative and down on ourselves, it basically brings into our conscious mind, like, where did you get this from? You know, you are wonderfully made. You are actually an amazing writer. You're amazing at this. Like, let's get with it. So it's a very inner dialogue. So the first conscious living practice that I preach is talking through it. It is an amazing catharsis, like release of emotions when you talk with friends, talk with very like comforting, understanding friends, talk therapy, talking with a coach. But there is amazing things that happen when you start talking it out. You can't feel it till you speak it. I've heard that a million times. Writing in a journal. This helps us to tap into ourselves and get to know ourselves better, especially when it comes to free writing. Basically sitting down and for 5 to 10 minutes a day, just writing whatever is on our heart. A lot of times I'll write in a journal and then I'll go back to the previous month and I'll read through it. And I was like, I don't even remember writing that. That's amazing. And it really helps us to get to know our subconscious and ourselves. And it's also another amazing release of emotions. So releasing those emotions that have been pent up throughout our body. Positive affirmations, and it can feel a little funny at first, but basically it's catching yourself when you're on a negative thought loop about yourself and restating that into a positive I am statement. So for example, today, I'm a horrible speaker, and then catching that thought in myself and saying, actually, I'm a really good speaker. Christa, you are a great speaker. And just speaking to yourself that way, it sounds silly at first, and a lot of people even look in the mirror when they say it, but it helps to train the mind to stay grounded and positive during stress and releases you from that negativity, fear, worry, anxious feeling. So it's almost like a loving parent or a loving God telling you that you're actually amazing and everything's going to be okay. Creative outlets are an amazing way to express feelings and experiences that may not be able to put into words. It creates this incredible focus on the present moment and not the past or future, and it sharpens our flow state. When you're in your flow state, you're doing things that you love, your frontal lobes are online, no stress, no anxiety, and it's really an amazing way to manage stress. Envisioning, my favorite, is future self envisioning. So if you're about to do something that scares you, speak in front of a crowd, maybe give a big presentation, think about how amazing you're going to feel when it's done and when you've accomplished it, and focus on that feeling instead of the anticipation leading up.
Hey, Christa, I think the slide, you might want to try to share screen one more time. Mine is stuck on emotionally, physical, and spiritual, that screen. There you go. Perfect.
We'll go back through that. talking through it, journaling, positive affirmations. All right. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. Envisioning your future self. So even like 5 years down the road, when you're thinking about your goals, like where you want to take your business, your personal growth, like how you're going to feel when you get there. Envision where you want to be. I did this not too long ago, and I envisioned myself like in my living room with amazing friends, laughing and being joyful. So just being able to feel those feelings of happiness and joy in the future, instead of playing all of those horrible scenarios out in your mind. It releases the good hormones instead of the bad. So it's actually a release of endorphins. And then also get out of your comfort zone. This is hard to do, but when you get out of your comfort zone, when you do things that your body tells you is not safe, but your conscious mind really knows is safe, it helps you to prove to your subconscious that there is no fear in doing this. And it also helps to build new neural pathways in your frontal lobes and respond to life stress when unexpected things happen. So that is everything for conscious living practices. And I'm going to talk now about mindfulness. And I'm going to share a little backstory on this. I have 3 children, 9, 6, and 3. And 3 years ago, I had my son, Rylan. All of my children were born via C-section. So the first was an emergency. The second was planned, and the third were planned. But when I had my second C-section, I was so full of anxiety because I thought I was going to die. I thought that was the end. I was in constant anxiety and just thought the worst was going to happen, that my blood pressure got so high that they had to stop my surgery and calm me down. And they couldn't give me anything at the time to like help assist that. So when I was going into my third C-section, when I had my son, I brought it up to my counselor. I was like, I am so anxious, like nothing's helping. Prayer, journal, like nothing is helping. And he said, I would love it if we could try something called meditation. And I'd heard about it. And he said, what does meditation mean to you? I was like, all I know is that you're quiet. And he said, okay. And so he took me through the process. And I can say that I practiced this when I had Rylan, my son, and it was the most enjoyable birth I had. I remembered every bit of it, the positive and the negative. I didn't remember only the negative. I remembered his face when he was born. I remembered the feeling. I took myself through breathing practices and visualization and focus, and I will say that it works. It does not work for everyone, but I hold a practitioner's certificate in it, and I hope to one day be able to teach this to many people, but I'm going to teach you guys a little bit more about it today. So mindfulness is an awareness of the present moment, sounds and activities without blocking them out. So it brings people into full conscious awareness in a place of choice and intention instead of that autopilot mode. I love to explain autopilot as if you leave one place and you get to another and you get there and you're like, I have no idea how I got here. No clue. My subconscious just drove me home. So the idea of mindfulness is to train your mind to experience and process the world through the senses instead of continuously analyzing with your mind. I'm going to talk a little bit more about different types of mindfulness. So the somatic experience Trauma Institute explains it in my favorite way. So the curious, non-judgmental awareness of the here and now, enhanced through sensory perceptions rather than replaying negative events in the past or anticipating and rehearsing possible events in the future. So essentially, mindfulness is training the mind to let things play out as they happen instead of anticipation of what's to come or based on what's happened in the past. So types of mindfulness, the first type is meditation. It is a type of mental training, not a religion. It was started in Buddhist practices, but it is not a religion. It is, in the Christian sense, I've actually spoken with my minister, and he says it's listening to your heart, listening to God. Prayer is speaking. Meditation is listening. So it helps you to train your mind to flow from thought to thought to the next instead of focusing on one specific thing. And again, prayer is speaking to God, and meditation is quieting the mind and listening and connecting with yourself and viewing thoughts as they pass by like clouds in the sky, is what I like to say. A lot of people have a hard time with meditation. They have a hard time with getting still. And I can attest I was one of them. And it is not for everyone. So what I suggest, if that's something you want to try, is starting small, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, working your way up to where you can feel comfortable being quiet. I still am not the best meditator. I prefer mindful movement, which I'm going to talk about next. Mindful movement is basically creating like a walking, a yoga, a Tai Chi. They're all experiences that you can have where you can be fully aware of the here and now and not caught up in your mind. That's not to say you won't get up in your mind when you're walking or practicing yoga or Tai Chi, but the whole practice of doing it as much as possible is just training the mind to be present. When I'm walking, thinking about the movement of my hip joints, feeling my feet as they hit the ground, looking at colors as I walk, looking at leaves, different types of ferns, really observing and feeling the sensations in my body and smelling and doing my best, but not judging when I do get in my mind. So often I can pop back into, my grocery list or what I'm going to make it for dinner, or ruminating on how I addressed a phone call that I wasn't really happy about. But the thought of mindful movement is being able to connect with the breath and quieting the mind and letting the body and the breath lead you in the present moment. Tai Chi, I don't know a whole lot about it, but it is like a widely known mindfulness movement. It's basically a Chinese experience of like opposites, like calm and effort. So I think it's pretty similar to yoga. Mindful eating. So if anyone ever is guilty of grabbing things out of the pantry and just shoving it in your mouth and not necessarily being able to taste it, that's me. Basically, eating brings us comfort. So mindful eating brings awareness to the eating experience and brings us to a place of peace and gratefulness for nourishing our bodies. So basically mindful eating is only eating when you're hungry. So when your tummy rumbles, when your blood sugar drops, when you have those cues to know that you're hungry and not just eating to eat. And then also, this is another thing that you might feel silly to do at first, but it's actually incredible once you start doing it. Think about what all went into providing the food on your table. So if you are eating breakfast with eggs and bacon, and I don't want to get too morbid and think about all the horrible things that could happen for any vegetarians on the call, but if you're eating breakfast and you're drinking orange juice, think about the sun and the water and the rain that had to go into making the orange, and the people that picked the oranges, and the actual process of making the juice, and the truckers that spent their time to get the orange juice to the grocery store, and the people that worked at the grocery store. All of this energy went into helping you to nourish your body and just being able to feel a spiritual gratefulness for that. So these are all types of mindfulness practices that I try to practice in my everyday. They aren't for everyone, but I would encourage you, if you are interested in calming anxiety, that you try these out. These are actually proven to help reduce stress and reduce anxiety in everyday life. And then I'm going to go over some tips for creating a safe space. A lot of people feel uncomfortable being still because in their past and with any traumatic experience, if they were still, they were hurt or they could have died. So to be still might not feel comfortable to them. So my biggest tip when you're creating a space to meditate is to create a safe space. And you do that by integrating signs of safety. So taste. I love a chamomile tea. So touch. A lot of kids that experience any type of disorders, a lot of the things that people recommend that they do is to rub their arms. So just that the rubbing of the arm can like puts you at ease and puts you in a safe space. Smell. I have essential oils going right now. I have this calming blend. It's actually by doTERRA. It's for anxiety. They've created it for anxiety. So sound, a lot of people love silence. A lot of people don't. So if you do not like complete silence, maybe turn on some calming music. In my old house, I'm currently in transition from one house to another. I'm in a rental house. I had wind chimes on my back porch. And I love to sit outside by the wind chimes, and they brought a lot of calm and soothing to me. Sight, if you do not want to close your eyes, is there anything that you can focus on and breathe through any of that uncomfortableness? And this is the most important part when practicing any type of healing. And I hope that if you don't take away anything, this is the one thing you take away. All of the things that I discussed earlier is about bringing awareness. But the point of mindfulness and conscious living is to be aware, but not judgmental of yourself. So awareness and acceptance is the most important part of any healing journey. So do not judge, see things, accept things as they are. And when you do judge, because you will, because we're all innately designed to judge if things are safe, not safe. So recognize those judgments, but don't shame yourself for that. So that's everything I have in terms of conscious and mindful living. And I want to go over a couple of tips for things to limit. So one thing to limit is other people and anxiety. Again, if you are prone to anxiety and someone comes around you and is also anxious, it's not going to be a good thing. So a term that they use in psychology is co-regulation. So if you're unable to regulate yourself, be around someone that can help regulate your nervous system. Eliminate cues of danger. Cues of danger for you could be, I'll just name some of mine. Social media banter. I can't handle it. The news. For a long time at the beginning of this pandemic, I would look at the news every single morning. And it just put me in a state of unwell anxiety for the rest of the day. Caffeine. I love my cup of coffee in the morning, but if I drink too much, that can kick my blood pressure into high gear and cause my anxiety to flare. Alcohol. I know a lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but alcohol is actually not the best if you're experiencing like extreme anxiety. I love a good glass of wine, but if I'm already experiencing a lot of anxiety, if I have a glass of wine on top of that, I'll be waking up in the middle of the night and with heart palpitations. It actually lowers your dopamine levels and sends my body into a panic. Sugar and complex carbs can actually increase that glucose level in the bloodstream and cause anxiety. And what I talked about the things to limit, and again, everyone's body is different. So if you are fine to drink alcohol or 5 cups of caffeine a day, that is completely no judgment. But this is something that is recommended that you limit by the studies, by the researchers. So do more of this. Do more laughing. That actually activates that vagus nerve to bring you to more of a heart center. Be around people that make you feel safe. There's a lot of healing in relationships. If anyone's experienced any trauma in their relationships, so be around the people that you feel safe. Dance, hug, breathe deep, and do things that make you feel joy, because everyone deserves to be as happy and joyous as they can be in their lives. But actually doing these things are very healing and brings you back to a place of heart center and knowing that you're going to be okay if you enjoy life. So what time is it? I'm going to check the time. We have 20 minutes left. So I am actually going to turn my camera off and take you guys through a guided meditation. The reason I'm turning my camera off is because it can sometimes feel weird if someone's staring at you while you have your eyes closed. So I'm going to invite everyone at this time, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. Our minds are racing. It can cause us to fall into a mindless routine. Break the pattern by stopping and sitting. We might not want to stop. We might be afraid to stop, but we need to stop. So as you enter your quiet space, take 3 deep breaths. With each breath, see if you can get to a place of calm. All is well. May this time and place be your shelter. When you come into this place, may the weight of the world fall off your shoulders. Feel blessed by the peace that the world cannot give. May all who face change today find themselves in a place of ease and peace. Seek the serenity to accept the things in our lives we cannot change. Seek the courage to change the things we can. And seek the wisdom to know the difference. Rumi states, fear is non-acceptance of uncertainty. If we accept uncertainty, it becomes adventure. Our anxiety comes from us wanting to control the future. The one thing we can be sure of is that everything changes. Acceptance of change helps to keep us balanced. This too will pass. I'd like to end our meditation today with a prayer for all of you. Dear Heavenly Father, you know that we live in a crazy and chaotic world. You also know our struggles in our daily life. When life gets to be too much, please help us to come to you. Calm our thoughts and emotions and open our hearts to your peace, comfort, and wisdom. Help us to not live in fear. Please help to reduce the feelings of fear and anxiety that plague us. Help us to rest in you and trust you as we navigate through this world. In your name we pray. Amen. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and bring feeling back to your body. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Stretch if you need to. Hope that by doing this guided meditation, it brought to you some sort of peace today, so that you may go with the rest of your day without as much anxiety as your day might have started. And we have 15 minutes left. And I would love to take any questions or to talk to anyone that is open to it. And you can put questions in the chat or raise your hand if anyone knows how to do that, or unmute yourself. If you open the participants button and hit raise hand, it actually raises a hand, or just put it in the chat. If no one has any questions, and if you do, please go ahead, but I would love to hear how everyone's feeling after the meditation. And some people might have had kids screaming in the background, but I would love to hear how you feel.
It was great. Thank you, Christa.
Hi, Tessa.
It was really, the beginning of it was a little bit difficult because there were school buses going by my house honking. They wouldn't stop, but eventually they left. But no, I think it's really, it's important to remind us, I never take the time to just sit and meditate. And I think that that's such an important thing, meditate or pray and just take the time to be still. So thank you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks, Tessa. The buses are they're doing in Williamson County like a bus brigade today for all the schools. So.
I totally forgot, and I thought like our house was under attack. I wasn't sure what was happening.
That's where my kids are. I got to kick them out for a while. Okay, if no one has anything, I just wanted to share the statistic. 50% of our happiness comes from our genetic makeup, things that are out of our control. 10%, and this is actually based on a research study done for 10 years, 10% of our happiness comes from our circumstances, but 40% of our happiness comes from what we can control, and that's our daily lives and intentional activities. So that was encouraging for me to know that even if my circumstances were bad, and even if I had a lineage that created any type of anxiety disorder that I wasn't going to be happy with, I wasn't going to let that stop me from being happy and focusing on the things I could control. And thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to everyone that showed up today, showed up for yourself. If you want to follow me on Instagram, Christa B Coaching. I put my mobile number up there because anyone can text me. Anyone can text me and let me know if you need help. And I can either offer help or I can put you in touch with someone that can. And so can all the girls at Faithfully Restored. And also my website, christabooker.com, just has a little bit more information about what I do. And you can sign up for my email that I will be putting together just in monthly. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone at Faithfully Restored. I'm going to look through the list of people. Thank you, everyone, so much for showing up today.